Hello and welcome back inside the Parc Fermé for podcast number, holy cow, is it podcast 800? It is podcast 800. Absolutely. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not
AKA Negative Camber. You know what we do on race weekends.
We watch one, then we talk about it. Then we watch one, then we talk about it. Come on, Todd.
That's exactly what we do. But before doing that, I have to introduce my guest tonight, which it's got to be said up front. There's a bit of a disclaimer. You know him as the International, and there's a reason, because he's nestled in a hotel room on dodgy Wi-Fi, and now he's tethered to a mobile, his iPhone. That's the links he goes to bring you this incredible podcast, Paul. 800 episodes.
Well done, sir. I applaud you.
Oh, man. You've
been on every one. I certainly have been.
I haven't. But, we should get a gift. That's right, Paul. You're going to be enjoying yourself as you podcast your way to mediocrity. You, Grace, and Todd will offer these stunning podcasts, 800 of them. Yeah. So there you go.
You get to lose your name, and then everyone else in the world then gets to add F1 in their podcast title with no problems.
Right. Everybody's got F1 in their name, Formula One in their name, no
so
problems.
Crazy. All the trouble you had.
I know.
With F1 blog, and then all of a sudden, whatever, guys, go for it.
Whatever. Yeah. F1 this, F1 podcast, everybody's F1. Fair game, not for us.
Yeah.
Well, that's spend most of my life with the target on my back, Paul. That's the way it goes, man.
I thought you'd be wearing at least the British one this week in honor of poor departed Queen.
I totally was going to, and I wore that a couple days since the passing. I had my British Union Jack on, and I wore that in solitude, changed my graphic on socials with you. I was standing firm with you, my friend, in the tragic passing of Queen Elizabeth. So, it's I've never known life without her, nor have you. No,
indeed.
The only queen you've ever known.
The only queen I've ever known. Only known one way to sing the song.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, she was an awesome person, certainly compared to some of the rest of her family, but I don't know. I mean, just a lot of respect for the lady, quite honestly.
Yeah,
she went
absolutely.
through a lot. She always held her head high, so farewell.
Yes, now we have Chuck, so you got that going for us. So I was going to, and then I thought, well, I've worn that a couple times this week, probably gonna wash that. And so, that was off like a dirty shirt. And then I thought, well, it's Italy, and I got Italian stuff.
Well, there you go. It's apropos, I guess. Isn't it?
Right.
Yes.
Right. It's Italy. So, to all of our Italian friends out there, we're going to be reviewing the Italian Grand Prix as it happened. Ciao. And I even had Italian for dinner tonight.
I had airplane snacks.
Oh, peanuts.
No peanuts. You can't have them.
It's pretzels.
The non-tasting cardboard.
Yeah, exactly. Types. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, well, let's do a little table setting for the Italian Grand Prix, shall we? Since it has launched a cavalcade of abuse, criticism, teeth gnashing, and rib roping. Or robe ripping. Let me try that. Let's watch out for the hopgrasser. Whew. It's crazy. All right. From a brand perspective, now you guys all heard this, but it bears repeating. Monza has hosted more F1 championship races than any other track in history. And due to its long straights and layout, as well as the average speed of a lap at 160 plus miles an hour, it has become known as the Temple of Speed. For all the right reasons. And as such, one would expect it to produce some fantastic races. Now, to be fair, it certainly has done that. And it also has produced some very tragic races, I might add. But this weekend was neither of those categories. It was neither incredible racing or tragic racing. It was, well, pedestrian in nature, and it was nearly choked to death by a ham-fisted safety car session on lap 48, but we'll get into that. Heading into the weekend, here's what I noticed, Paul. It was clear that Red Bull was still the quickest car. Maybe not Spa quick, but still quicker than Ferrari. And the stark truth is that the Red Bull is just better on its tires than Ferrari is, hence the decision from Red Bull to take a bigger rear wing for Max than what would normally be associated with a track like Monza. They could afford that drag deficit, had better grip levels, and in this very hot Italian Grand Prix, they had less degradation and they were better on tires. Red Bull chose to take an additional engine this weekend to add to their engine pool as a safety measure, not born out of necessity, mind you, but as a safety measure for the balance of the season. And despite the grid penalty of 5 places that left Max starting in 7th, 5 laps later, he was on Charles Leclerc's tail, and the writing was pretty much on the wall at that point for Ferrari and its strategists at that point. Anything I'm missing in my table setting there, Paul?
For Monza, no, I don't think so. It's a pretty simple track. The performance of the car is obviously paramount. The drivers can make somewhat difference, but I think the car has the more potential to lower lap time than the driver can take out of it.
Yeah. Good. All right. Let's talk about the teams as they finish. So start at Red Bull, Sergio Perez in P6, Max Verstappen P1 takes the victory. Max got a good start, was up to 3rd in just 3 laps, and then dispatched George Russell's Mercedes to close in on Leclerc's tail by lap 5. He inherited the lead when Ferrari stopped to try to do anything different with their strategy to try to have a chance to beat Max. Now, in one sense, you could argue that Ferrari's strategy failed them again, but we'll get into that when we're covering Ferrari. For now, Max extends his lead with this victory, but he also, once he got around Leclerc during the stops, he then extended his lead, and he survived that virtual safety car and the actual safety car session to take the win behind the safety car, garnering a lot of boos from a very frustrated crowd because of the result. But it's a little difficult to pin that on Max. It wasn't his fault.
No.
It is what it is, and he benefited from it. And there you go. But still had a heck of a lot of pace in hand, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, there's undoubtedly the Red Bull in Max Verstappen's hands is by far the fastest car, no matter which track you go to, it seems. And we knew the Red Bull was fast in a straight line, and this is what this track brings out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they had a lot to play with. I mean, if you doubted Max could get up in the podium from 17th, there's no doubt that he certainly had a shot of the win from wherever, in the top 10 at the start. So it's happened a lot quicker than Charles Leclerc hoped, right? But it just showed the utter dominance of that car and driver package right now. It's really untouchable. I mean, no one's going to even come close.
Yeah. That's how I feel too. And this actually, I have been stuck at the very bottom of our fantasy GP league since this season.
Did you finally give up on the Ferrari?
I did, and I nailed the entire weekend. I nailed first, second, third, and pole. The only thing I didn't get is fastest lap. I didn't have Sergio getting that fastest lap, but anyway,
wow. No, I had Russell in third. I had Leclerc on pole, but I had Verstappen and Leclerc flip flop. Just I don't know why.
I know.
Really, I should know better. But that's just.
I know. It's crazy.
But,
what are you going to do? Sergio had a tougher race. He had that front right brake disc overheat on him, forcing in an early stop for hards. Unfortunately, his pace on the hards just wasn't really there. It wasn't great, and he said he had to lift and coast initially on those hards. He was lifting and coasting to cool his brakes off, so he could never really get the temps in the hards to make him work effectively, and he wasn't quick enough at that point. They boxed him again late for softs, hoping he could have a shot at Lewis, and to be honest with you, he may have, but the safety car pretty much neutered that opportunity for him to move forward. So
it's interesting. Perez's car that don't happen to Verstappen's car. I'm not saying conspiracy. I'm just saying I think they try things with Perez's. I mean, because he had the rear wing that was going crazy, and Verstappen had not. He had the front brake disc overheating. Verstappen did not. I mean, there's obviously a difference in driver styles that can affect certain things. I just wonder if they use Perez as a bit of a test mule sometimes for other things.
I don't know. At first I was thinking, well, I don't know, maybe he likes more bias up front, and maybe he's just overworking those brakes. But, he's been doing that. If that's the case, and he does like a little more bias in the front, trying to make that car pointier, maybe, he'd been doing that all season. So this is the first we've seen it. Yeah,
I mean, obviously, this every circuit layout brings its own demons with it.
Yeah, its own
and thinking back, actually, Verstappen had a flappy rear wing one time where Perez did not. So maybe it's just the nature of the beast, or whoever was building that thing that
it's
week.
It's a quinky dink.
Yeah. So it was a shame for Sergio, because Verstappen is looking so sharp, and the car and the team looking so sharp in his hands. And Sergio, you think, and he's done it a few times, but you'd think he should be right on his tail, but it's just not happening for one reason or another.
Yeah, I mean, he spent the day nursing a wounded brake, and I get that. So P6 is not that bad considering everything he was facing. And reality of it, I think he said post-race, or one of the people on the team said, hey, we're just lucky it wasn't a DNF with that brake. I mean, it very easily could have been. So anyway, that's how it turned out for Red Bull. Let's talk about, let's see, who's next? Who could it be?
Who could it be?
Ferrari. Let's talk about Ferrari. Charles Leclerc in P2, Carlos Sainz in P4. Charles took the lead from pole, was setting a decent pace, but when Max quickly got through the traffic and was closing in on Charles, the virtual safety car offered a decision at that point. It's decision time. Virtual safety car comes out. Max just side through the rest of the field like they were hot butter, or warm butter and a hot knife. And the reality of it is he got all the way up there. What are we going to do? They're going to try whatever they can, at this point, in fairness to them. He was closing in. The virtual safety car came out, offered that decision. The team tried anything they could to have a shot at a win. So they chose to box Charles early and convert him to a two-stopper with a lot of, hey, what do you think? You up for plan B? You up for plan C? More of that, which I think has folks scratching their heads. So why are you debating this with your driver? You see his lap times, wouldn't you know? And there was like, well, we're a democracy here. We want consensus. I'm thinking, I don't know that there's really time for all of that nonsense.
Not on a race team, I don't think.
Yeah, no. Just look at the lap times, look at the pace. You know what you did on those compounds on Friday and Saturday. Yep. Make the right call and switch it, right?
Yeah, you should have your matrix already set out, quite honestly.
And
you should. There shouldn't be much debate on that kind of stuff. It was. The virtual safety car, they were a bit unlucky in when the virtual safety car went off, because he was just pulling out of his pit box.
Yeah.
I mean, that whole time he was running down pit lane on the rev limiter under virtual safety would have been time gain big time, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So they were a little unlucky there, but knowing their tire deg situation, it was just too early to go to mediums and give it a go.
Yeah. That was the tough thing.
And I know you say, well, you got to give it a go. Well, you don't. You just have to have the right decisions in place, and you don't have to roll your dice or throw your dart against the board because you made so many bad decisions beforehand. You just need to have the right decisions laid out before you, and then you don't have to question it.
Right. I was thinking at the time, Paul, they're going to bring him in. They're going to switch to a two-stopper, so they're going to go to hards because it was early in the race. Right. And so I thought they'd go to hards and then try to make it to the end. But they went to mediums, and as soon as they went to mediums, I looked at the laps, and I'm thinking, whoa, that's a long way to go on a set of mediums. Yep. Knowing that Max hasn't boxed yet, and when Max does and puts fresh rubber on, you're toast. Yeah.
Yep.
So the two-stopper, as I put in the notes, is going to be hard because they went on mediums, and that's a very long time. They were probably, perhaps, maybe, I'm guessing, hoping that we'll put them on mediums, and hopefully we'll get another safety car, some other element to, kind of luck to go our way. And
but you'd still be behind Max at that point.
You
you
would
know.
be, but unfortunately, Charles just didn't have the pace to reel Max in by the time the safety car came out, and that pretty much locked everything in. And as much as fans felt like they were denied or robbed of some sort of epic or titanic battle at the end because it finished behind the safety car, the reality of it is, I get it that the cars are all bunched up, but Max and Charles came in. Charles had on used; they were a scrub set of softs. Max were on new, if memory serves correct. So, and he had clearly had pace in hand.
Mhm.
And so I think it's painfully clear all weekend that, Ferrari were tire limited at Monza while Red Bull weren't. And that was really displayed by that large rear wing. And I think they had pace in hand and they could call the shots and manage that
Yeah.
pace and manage that race.
Yeah, I think ultimately the percentages were much higher on Max's favor, no matter what Ferrari did, really. Um,
I agree.
but yeah, I mean, but when they did choose to bring him in was too late
Mm-hmm.
because at one point there was a 10-second deficit, and when Leclerc was ahead, that was the
Yeah.
time to pit him, and then
Right.
you'd only be 10 seconds adrift, not 20 seconds adrift.
Right.
They should have, if they were going to do it, they should have done it way earlier than they did, and they didn't give him enough time, and his car didn't have enough pace. And Monza invariably, because it's a lot of straight line performance, there's not a lot of places to make up time in the corners. So
Right.
um,
Right.
Charles did all he could, but there wasn't enough there for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've talked about that track characteristic most recently, probably when we were talking about the Austrian Grand Prix. When you have so few turns, any error that you make, you carry that. I mean, that's an instant deficit for the entire lap, effectively, on a track like this. And
Yeah.
as you just mentioned, Paul, there's not a lot of turns to make up gains or gain that time back if you had a deficit. It's very difficult to lose time at Monza and then have enough opportunity at different places at Monza to gain it back anyway.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to do. So Carlos had a terrific race, charging back through the field and starting at the back. In fact, I think Carlos may have had a podium if it weren't for the safety car ending the race. I was initially wondering if I guess I was initially wondering why Ferrari were making so many suggestions to Charles about strategy and changing things so much. But I also kind of feel like, and maybe this is the Ferrari fan in me coming out, and I try not to be biased on this, but if you're still at the end of the day, I think it boils down to this, and it is painful as a Ferrari fan. If you're still watching each race and listening to the narrative on the broadcast and media about Ferrari being on par with Red Bull and just screwing up strategy, you may be missing the point that actually what we are seeing is a complete Red Bull dominance this year. And we've been witnessing this for quite a while now. Max mathematically can clinch the world championship at the next race.
Wow.
So
that's insane.
So that's kind of where we are. So I know each race weekend is like, oh, could Charles, he's back in the hunt and he's running second place and it's close. It's really not. The narrative and the excitement, they want that excitement to carry on to the last race. So, of course, they're going to really big up those battles each weekend. But Red Bull firmly has their neck around their hands around in a chokehold of this championship.
Yeah.
And Ferrari just doesn't have the pace.
Yeah, but they have shot themselves in the foot way more times than Red Bull have. So, I mean, they made it even easier.
I agree.
mean, there's no doubt the Red Bull is but it shouldn't be over so early if Ferrari had done things a lot different. In fact,
I agree. You had reliability issues, right?
Yeah.
I was looking at this week and I thought it was interesting. Not necessarily what parts and pieces and grid penalties Ferrari has taken, but maybe more indicative to me is looking at how many Bottas is taken, because those are Ferrari engines. And you can see how many individual pieces he's taken of a new Ferrari element in that power unit. He's taken 6 ECUs or 6 Kerrs or whatever it is out of 3 allowed, and it just starts to show you where that reliability elements and what they're chasing with the Ferrari engine. So you had reliability issues, you're right. Yes, strategy, absolutely, you had bad strategy calls. There's no doubt about it. But to be fair, Paul, you had unforced errors from the drivers.
Absolutely. No, it's a Ferrari team
Yeah.
deficit, as you said, strategy, car reliability, car pace, and
Yeah.
driver error. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And
yeah.
that all combines. And when you look at that in aggregate and then juxtapose that with Max and Red Bull, he had some DNFs, some mechanicals, but just
Yeah.
nowhere near that. And the
Yeah. I
strategy,
mean, they had a bad start to the season. If
they
you remember,
did.
Charles was, I think, more than a race ahead in
He
points
was.
within the
Hmm.
first handful of races. And it just, after the pendulum swung the other
Yeah.
way and it never stopped.
Dramatically. Yep.
So, yeah.
So that's where we are. As I said, a Ferrari fan pains me to be that critical on my team, but it's the way I see it, and that's sticking to my story. Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton P5, George Russell P3. Paul, Mr. Consistency, wasn't able to hold off the recovering Red Bull Verstappen, nor mount a challenge against Leclerc's Ferrari, but he delivered yet another podium spot, a third place, and moves, get this, folks, while you're all still mired and trying to figure out, oh, Lewis, he's awesome. And he is. You know, I've been on my soapbox all season long about how Toto and everyone just seems to kind of marginalize what George is doing over there. He is only 7 points behind in third in the Drivers' Championship. If he gets 7 more, it's going to be Max wins the World Championship, Drivers' Championship with Charles and George Russell.
Wow.
Now, that car, I think we can all argue, really doesn't have a lot of business competing at that level, but George's consistency is key here, you know? You may have a 7-time world champion in that car, but what George is delivering is consistency, which has paid big dividends for this team. And maybe that team is so large and so well off that George being in third, they don't really give a damn. But I think that's marginalizing, I think, the effort that George has put into this year. I don't want to overplay that, but I think we're doing a hell of a lot of underplaying it.
Yeah, he's a smart cookie and a fast cookie.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
And I really super admire drivers that can drive that fast and not make errors. You know, for our team on the Heart of Racing team, Ross Gunn is of the same ilk. You just marvel at the speed they can bleed out of a car without error. You know, and everyone's going to make an error every now and again, but yeah, that's really strong stuff.
Very, very strong. And that is where he's doing it much sooner than people like Max Verstappen achieved that level, right? He's doing it much quicker than other champions have. He's still going to make some errors. Don't get me wrong. He will, but he's not making them at the rate or frequency that even other, champions have in the past. And Max is pretty ragged when he got into the big team. And
I mean, he was young, he was ragged. That was acceptable. But George has really
been consistent.
He came in, even when in his Williams days, he came in very polished.
He did.
Very calm.
Yeah. So I think he's doing a great job up in P3 podium, well deserved. Much like Carlos, though, in fairness to Lewis, Lewis had to climb his way out of a penalty-induced hole. He took more engine parts, and he ran that really long first stint to sort of get him out of traffic, get him out of trouble, get him into the top 10, and then he was going to work his way back. Now, Lewis said, look, we were saying it could be anywhere from 2 to, P2 to P5 or 6 or whatever it was. So he felt pretty good about P5 in the long run. But when he got there, they got him boxed, got a fresh set of tires on him. He was able to come out, muscle his way to 5th. Great 2-car pass out of the chicane to turn 1. I thought was terrific. Caught them both napping. And I didn't see it, but apparently he also hit some debris early on and damaged his front wing a little bit, that he was sort of nursing a aero issue on the front wing as well. So, I don't want to paint Lewis as having a miserable race. He really didn't. He was farther back in the grid. Came back to P5.
Yeah, he was patient. I mean, you can only measure him against Carlos, really.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Carlos was just ahead of him in the finish, so I think he actually did a pretty good job. I was a little worried at the beginning because he took so long to get up, but
Yeah.
that's the measure of the champion, just being patient. And maybe it had something to do with that debris, perhaps, that he was trying to figure out how to get around that, imbalance,
Yeah.
so to speak. But yeah, it was a good, solid day for Hamilton. Probably a fun one for him, I would imagine. You got to pass all those cars and get through.
Yeah.
But, obviously he's used to higher accolades than fifth place. So I think he's probably satisfied, but not exactly super excited either.
Yeah. He wants to win, period.
Yeah.
That's how he's built,
Yeah.
He's
I
not built
could
to go
imagine
P5.
both he and Russell are just dying to be the guys to get the first win back for Mercedes. We've seen many wins by Mercedes, but now it's been a little while. It's going to feel all new again, right? And I'm sure Lewis and Russell are a bit cagey in the garage. I bet they are. I can't imagine them being super buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. And both George and Lewis had a very nice tribute to Queen Elizabeth too over the weekend. I thought was really nice of them. The moment of silence at the Grand Prix, I thought was a really good touch for the Italian crowd. So kudos to you. All right, we'll talk about McLaren. Speaking of another Brit, Lando Norris in P7, Daniel Ricciardo DNF. Lando went for that long stint as the team boxed Ricciardo earlier. So they boxed Dan early to cover the Gasly undercut threat. So that left him to his own devices at this point. And on fresh tires towards the end, Lando was able to jump his teammate because he went longer, stayed out longer on that long stint, had fresher tires later in the race, jumped Dan, got up to P7 at that point, came home ahead of the Alpines, which is really critical for best of the rest because that's the battle. It's a big battle worth millions of dollars, and right now Alpine's leading it. So Alpine had a miserable weekend. Lando capitalizing on that, finishing P7. So a good result from him. And, all things given, I kind of thought he might be higher than that, if I'm honest, given all the grid penalties. And
I mean, they both started on the second row, right?
Yeah, and I was hoping he could kind of hang on and hold off a few of those cars coming that were out of position.
Yeah, they're stuck in a rut a little bit here with performance.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what's going on with the McLaren. It was better for Ricciardo, obviously. But once again, Monza is more about power and straight line and aero, and the few corners you have, there's few corners to snag you, so to speak. So I think that's probably what helped Daniel be a little closer to Lando this weekend. I don't think it means Daniel made a big leap. I just think the track is simplistic enough where his troubles and his technique that is kind of not really working for the car doesn't show up as well as some other more maybe complicated tracks.
Yeah, for Dan, he had a good start. Was leading early on over Lando, but then they decided to cover Gasly. Gasly was going for an undercut on Dan. Couldn't get around him. He was going for an undercut. This left him out on worn tires towards the end, but it didn't really matter. He suffered a DNF parked on track in between Lismo 1 and 2. But that brought out the safety car, and then that whole debacle becomes the focal point of the entire weekend. So not a good race for Dan.
No, the one chance he gets to get some points and be close to Lando. And then,
I know.
Yeah, no, very just adds to the woes.
Does because he was leading Lando. Yeah, he was ahead. So AlphaTauri, Pierre Gasly, speaking of Pierre, P8, Yuki Tsunoda, P14. Pierre ran in the points for most of the day, Paul, and then he tried that undercut on Ricciardo, but it didn't work out. So he had to focus at that point on defense, right? And he kept his position from a lot of cars behind in that DRS train, and most notably kept De Vries, a very competitive De Vries and a Williams behind him, which is a pretty good job. Ends up in P8. He said, look, it's going to be a difficult weekend. The track wasn't going to flatter us. We had grid penalties that kind of kept us up, but I feel pretty confident and pretty happy that we were able to stay in the points and not drift backwards. So.
Yeah, no, it was good. I actually really did you see the in-car from De Vries after the race and Gasly went down and shook his hand? I mean, that was very cool because they were really tooth and nail, at it for a very long time. And I'm sure it was a good duel. I'm sure Gasly was happy that he beat him, right? I think it was a good tussle. I really do. I
Yeah, it
think
was.
that was a really good battle there, and good to see Gasly back in the points. He's a very handy driver, man. I
Yeah,
just don't think that team's been putting out a car that is worthy. They've had some difficulties, even
yeah.
even if Yuki has been a bit faster from time to time. I just don't think they've got a great package, which is surprising with the ties to Red Bull. But yeah, good for Pierre, and maybe it helps him if he's going to make that step to
Yeah.
Alpine.
Yeah, it'd be good. Yuki started at the back. Was making a little headway towards the front, but then they switched him when they boxed him, put him on hards. He said after that stop on the hards, he had no pace, could
Yeah,
not get grip in that tire. So they thought, well, okay, so they left him out. He was going backwards, couldn't get any heat in those tires. They boxed him again, which effectively left him out of the points and towards the back.
yeah,
And
that's unfortunate. I mean, that's kind of what the practices are for. You'd think they'd have better data
Mhm.
than that to know that that wasn't the way to go in that car. But
Yeah, yeah, there were a few that tried that hard, and I think even George, did, but he was setting okay pace, and I think what it showed. If I was reading time and scoring right, George, once he got those hards up to temp, he was setting pace that was a tenth or two within the leaders and mediums,
hmm
and okay, so what that told me is that the delta between the mediums or softs and the hards wasn't as great, but the hards still weren't faster.
as long as they would not want to be faster, but they should be
Yeah,
close. But if you can't switch them on, then the deficit is larger, right?
it's larger. Yeah, it's more
Yeah,
than a tenth or two. Yeah, you're right.
yeah.
So anyway, Williams, Nick DeVries sitting in for Alex Albon today. It was announced. Williams said he's recovering, he's getting better, he'll be released to go home. But come to find out, he had appendicitis, went in for emergency surgery on
Yeah.
Saturday, had his, I'm thinking he had a lithotroscopy and had his appendix removed. But then as he was recovering, he went into respiratory failure, had to be
That
re-intubated.
is so
Uh,
scary.
some sort of bad reaction with the anesthesia that they gave him, and so yeah, very scary, folks.
Yeah.
So hopefully, if you're listening, I know you are, Alex, get well soon. I want to see you back in Singapore.
Yeah, it gets
But
disappointing when Albon's Cats doesn't come on, but he does
I
tune in
know,
just in case it does.
I know, you never know when we're going to throw an Albon's cats at him.
No,
Uh,
that's true.
Now it's funny because I keep my notes, and so when I open up these notes for the next race review that we do at Singapore, there'll be these notes, and then I just write over them.
Mhm.
Last week I was looking at my comments for Williams last week. I was reminded that last week I suggested that the team. Remember I said last week Nicholas Latifi said, "Yeah, I just don't know why there's no pace." And I said last week if I was Yost. I don't know what he's doing, but I would put Nick DeVries in every free practice session, period, for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, if that was who I was targeting for next year. Well, we come into this weekend, and that's not exactly what I was thinking. Is Alex having an appendectomy?
Yeah.
But Nick thrown into Alex's seat, and with Alex out, Nick had very short notice. And here's what he did: he jumped in the car, Paul. Hadn't had any running in it, jumped in
Yeah.
that Williams, made it into Q3, and then
Well, he made it into Q2. but he got
Q2, I'm
bumped
sorry,
yeah,
bumped into, yeah,
top 10. Yeah.
top 10. But yes, made it in Q2, and then went on to deliver a P9 points finish, 2 points
Yeah.
for the team. It's a wonderful performance.
What? Yeah. Wonderful performance. As you say, I don't know how he did it. I mean, he's a well-seasoned young driver. Let's put it that way. I mean, he's
Yeah.
a Formula 3 champion, Formula 2 champion. He's
Formula
Formula E
E.
champion, but who
Yeah.
cares about that? But that doesn't have any bearing on driving a Formula 1 car. I do know that. But
Right.
but he's good in everything he jumps in.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the grid knows that, but no one really knows till you're really in the fire. And I don't think anyone would have expected it to go as well as it did.
No.
I mean, his P12, which is his legitimate spot in qualifying, was impressive alone. If you'd just done that, everyone would have been like, fine,
Impressive.
right? Because there's
Yeah.
some, these cars are complicated. it's not easy to jump in a car you don't know and get the best out of it, especially a car that you have to literally change nearly every corner to get everything. I mean, it takes a while. And he just drove his ass off, and he didn't have anything left at the end. We know that.
Yeah.
So he couldn't even lift his arms anymore, right?
Yeah.
So I guess he knows he needs to work out his arms a little harder to drive an F1 car. But I think, his little rehearsal here for what could come forward is going to make it a lot easier for him to find a slot on an F1 grid. It was sublime what he did. I mean, he's in a car that usually flounders at the back. Yes, this was a track that probably flatters their approach to designing a car, but you still got to execute, as you see Latifi's in P15. So not much more to say there about that.
Yeah. And, it isn't just that there was a ton of attrition ahead of him.
Mm-hmm.
Like 4 or 5 of the top leaders were out. It was just Alonso and Vettel, right?
Yeah.
And eventually Stroll, but they were behind him anyway.
Right.
And he was able to keep faster cars behind him, And
he harried Gasly the whole race. I mean, that's
he did, and kept Zhou Guanyu behind him, right?
Yep.
So it was a great performance. And I'll tell you the sad part I thought about the Nick DeVries story over the weekend is Crofty and Martin were talking about this is a big opportunity, and the pressure is massive on him, and if he has any design of getting an F1, he has to deliver. Well, I would argue that he did, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think he didn't leave anything on the table.
Right.
And he delivered. But it's interesting when they got Toto Wolff and they tried to get Toto to comment on Nick DeVries, and he was kind of like, good. Yeah.
Let's get back to Lewis.
Yeah. And it was kind of like, because they're releasing him at the end of this year. He's like, well, he's got to do what's good for him. It's kind of like, yep, we're done with him. And it's kind of like, that's okay. So you're not renewing his contract. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it could be a little more positive about his performance. And it's kind of a weird reaction, I thought. So anyway, a great result. At this point, folks, I can only assume that Latifi's father's support is preventing the team from making any obvious decision of replacing Nicholas immediately. If I owned Williams, I would be concerned about the potential points that the team is losing in the hands of Latifi, but perhaps Latifi's father's investment is more than what they would get if they were P9 the constructors. I don't know. Who knows? I have no way of knowing. But when a guy who's never driven the car can jump in, get into Q2, and then deliver a P9 performance, and while you're languished back in P15, it's decision.
It's over.
Yeah,
it should be over.
Yeah, he had a good run. Yeah. Alfa Romeo, Valtteri Bottas, P13. Sorry, my dog is protecting us from the world, saving the world.
Thank goodness. Yep.
Yeah.
Complex.
Yeah, I know. He's a miniature Australian Shepherd, and Australian Shepherds, they have nicknames for him. They call him Ozholes. Who knew? So anyway, Valtteri Bottas in P13, Zhou Guanyu P10. Joe started in 9th and fought his way to P10. I know that sounds weird, but that's what he had to do. He started in 9th, even though there were several cars coming back through the field, like Sainz, Hamilton, Perez. Well fought result. Yes, he lost all those positions. They came back through the field, but he fought his way back into the points in P10, scored a point. Think he did a great job.
Yep. We've said good things about him this year. Yeah. He's had some bad luck recently, so I think it's good for him, good for his ego, good for his future there to do it. He's really done not much wrong,
So
it's not a surprise.
No, you're Fred Vasseur. Would you change and put Antonio Giovinazzi in that car next year?
No, I would not.
I wouldn't either.
I wouldn't.
Unless Ferrari's giving me free engines. I don't know.
Yeah, unless there's some benefit elsewhere, drive-wise. No, I don't think Giovinazzi's a step up. I don't think he's much of a step down, but I think the upside of Joe is much higher because we saw Giovinazzi's
right
for years, right?
Yes, for several seasons. Yeah. Yeah, he's a known entity, and Joe has nowhere to go but growth, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I will tell you, I'm a little worried about Valtteri. He just seems like he's slipping into that malaise of mediocrity for some reason. There have been very legitimate reasons for his recent struggles, DNFs and those kind of things, way out of his control. But there's several reasons I can't explain either. Now, to be fair, in this race, he was hit from behind, pushed into the car in front of him, damaged his front wing, had to come back through the field to come all the way back up to P13. It's a noble charge by anyone's measure, but I don't know. Do you get that feeling like he's just kind of?
Well, I just think the cars struggled a little bit. I think it was flattering at the beginning of the year, and Bottas is a handy driver. He could out-qualify Hamilton, so he made the most of it when the car was really good. I just don't think they've made a lot of gains along the way, and so it's looked worse than probably his driving is adding to it.
Yeah, fair enough. That's a good point. Alpine, Fernando Alonso, DNF, Esteban Ocon, P11. If you asked me, I would have thought Alpine would be quick at Monza. And after all the penalties, grid penalties ahead of him, I honestly thought Alonso may have a peak at a top 5 or 6 finish. But boy, was I wrong.
Yeah.
Fernando retired with a water pressure issue. And even when he was racing, he couldn't hold Hamilton or Norris behind him. And despite Esteban's awesome nod to Michael Schumacher helmet, which I thought was awesome, the Frenchman qualified out of the top 10, said he had good pace, but he was stuck in the DRS train, couldn't get out of the traffic, ends up in P11. I'm just not quite sure after watching them the last 2 Grand Prix really take it to McLaren and take the lead in the Constructors' Championship. Boy, they were nowhere this weekend.
Yeah, it is a little surprising, but as we know, the nature of different tracks hold different things in they show up along the way. But we didn't think that the Alpine was a dog in a straight line for sure, but maybe it's the low downforce setup, not necessarily the straight line speed that it lacks a little bit. Right.
Let's see. Haas F1, Mick Schumacher, P12, Kevin Magnussen, P16. Mick ran a longer stint and even managed to get ahead of Kevin during the stops. But the team, and legitimately, I think the team knew heading to Monza this wasn't going to flatter their car. This track wasn't. Mick said that the mechanical issues they had during the weekend, he didn't get a lot of running time there. He had a bad qualifying session. That made the weekend really tough, and said that the Williams were really flying and difficult. And he's right. The Williams was flying in the hands of Nick, but that's not who Mick was battling. He was battling Latifi of all people. So he was referring to. I don't know, go figure. So anyway, but he did manage to get ahead of Sonoda too, so that's good. And finished up in P12 for Kevin. Paul, he had contact at the start, got hit from behind, pushed him into front, had damage to the car, pretty much put him to the back of the race, and he just pedaled home to 16.
Yep. Not much to say about the Haas team, but Schumacher definitely was sat in the garage for a long time over the weekend. So that's a shame.
It's a lack of running. Well, if there's very little to say about Haas, there's even less to say about Aston Martin, Paul.
Yes.
It's a shame. They had their first double DNF of the season here. And it's a shame because both were in points-paying positions early on, thanks to all the grid penalties. And I kind of thought, well, maybe they could have a sniff and a whiff at some points here. Just didn't happen. Both DNF'd.
Yes.
Lance said, well, it happens.
Yep.
Sure does when Dad's paying for it. Doesn't matter. I got you, buddy. I hear you.
I want it now. What's the matter with those twats down there?
Anyway, all right. Let's give some awards away, shall we?
Let's do it.
Let's do that. The first award we do is move the race.
Get down.
All right, Paul. Move the race.
I don't know if it's an anti-move or is it a move, but I'm going to give it to De Vries for his management of being lapped, blue flags, his battle between basically a sandwich between Gasly and Zhou, and be able to break Zhou's latch onto his DRS wing, and which whole benefits. It got Joe off his back and allowed him to keep attacking Gasly and finish that P9. I thought it was really impressive.
That was impressive. If you go back, if you missed that, you go back and watch. So they were all being blue flagged. And so as the leaders came through, De Vries very heads up move and working that to where the lapping leader that was coming through, he took advantage of that to put more distance between Joe, kind of caught Joe napping a little bit and took him out of DRS range of Zhou Guanyu. So it was a really heads up move.
Yeah.
Something you'd see from a guy like Nick, who's got a lot of races under his belt.
Yeah. I mean, not in this genre, right? But yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's heads up. Heads up play. Let's see. My move of the race, Lewis, on both the cars in the chicane first turn. I thought that was a great move. You know, he had fresh rubber on, but it was patented Lewis Hamilton. You know.
Yeah, I mean, he needed to get through these cars quick, and he certainly did, didn't he?
Yeah, yeah. Made quick
2 laps and 4 cars were behind him already.
I know.
Crazy.
They had that fresh rubber, and man, he was on it. You know, he was trying to like hell to get back up there, and so it was a great move. I thought it was a lot of fun to watch. And he kind of came out of that, saw them both going in, bobbing, back and forth with each other, and he was like, "Oops, see you guys." Went right around the inside. It was great. So anyway, all right. Let's see. Donkey of the race.
We'll do it live.
Yes, Paul. I think we are the same here.
I think I made my own little meme about this baby, but absolutely the FIA's management of that yellow flag debacle at the end was atrocious. Atrocious more because they said that after Abu Dhabi, they said they'd gone through everything, looked through it all, and now we've got definitive plans that are going to make everything great again. And good grief, that was the worst management of that kind of situation at all, and deprived us sitting at home and all the people at home at the track finished to a race. I mean, before we talked about Abu Dhabi, we said the best thing would have been to stop the race.
Yeah.
Right. Put everyone, and it was like that literally should have been what Massey did the first time. And we're assuming that when the FIA did their whole tribunal, looked into themselves inside, outside, that was maybe something they had on in their book, but no. And all we did was just see cars coming in and out of the pits, cars having to catch up to the pack, cars getting unlapped, cars doing this and that, and then the race was over, and there was no race. The last 5 laps could have so easily been changed, and so easily should be changed. Yeah. They should be ashamed of themselves, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, you and I talked about it, and I think I ended up just tweeting you and said, well, look, maybe the easiest way to do it is if there's any yellow flags in the last 5 laps of a race for stalled car, stopped car on track, anything that has to get moved either by marshals or tractor. If there's debris all over the track after a crash, if there is a crash, anything that require them to be in a safety car situation with back markers and unlapping and anything like that, they should just red flag and restart the race.
Yep. Get everyone in line. You don't have to wait 3 laps for the unlaps to catch up to the pack. It's all crap.
Yeah, just red flag it, stop the race,
line everyone up, and then go and give people a bloody race, because that's what they came for.
Right. And it just seems to me that would be an easy way to do it. But what the hell do I know? Is there anything else? I'm going to throw this out. Now, don't take this wrong. I'm assuming he's a delightful guy.
Who's this?
But does anybody think the new president of the FIA is just a little odd? Is it just me?
I mean, it's a little odd.
Wherever there's a camera, he's there. He's on the podium handing the winner trophy. He's over here. During qualifying, he was over at the scale with the FIA official weighing the drivers and helping them get on the scales and looking and reading the scales. And he was like telling the guy, and the guy's like writing. It's like, shit, I can see it. Hey, I've been doing this for 20 years. I can get the driver on the scale, I can read that, and he's over there and then helping him off. And then he's up front. He's at the national anthem. I'm surprised he didn't sing in the frickin' anthem, right?
Jesus.
The guy
Jean
is
Todt, we didn't see him
everywhere.
for 8 years, but this guy,
We didn't even know Jean Todt existed.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I
He's
mean, he'd show up with
photobombing
his
everybody.
girlfriend once in a while, but this guy, I
Yeah.
mean, I haven't checked my lounge in the back yet, but he may be back there having a beer.
Yeah,
I mean-
you go on vacation and somehow he appears in your family photos.
I know.
Yeah.
The guy may have been at my wedding, as far as I know. You know, that was 23 years ago. I mean, he's just like everywhere, and it's like, dude,
yeah. Can you
piece
just
of work.
do for some presidential things, especially when things go ass backwards like this? It makes
and that's
you
my
think,
point.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's the point I'm getting to. Dude, look, no offense at all, and I'm sure you take your job very seriously, as you should, and and the FIA performs a very important role.
Mhm.
But here's the thing: if you've got time after qualifying to sit around and individually weigh each driver, you may not have enough to do. Meanwhile, the house is on fire over here with red flags and safety car finishes and all the other crap that's going on. The grid penalty thing, where we watch qualifying, we might as well not watch qualifying because that's not how it's going to line up, and nobody knows. And it takes an abacus and maybe some sort of astronomy knowledge to figure it out. I mean, you got crap you could be working on, if I'm honest. And no, you're down weighing the drivers. What the hell? Anyway, sorry. I'm just beating a dead horse. I just find the whole thing really odd.
being a dead donkey.
Yeah, I know. It's just weird. All right, let's do drive the race. Oh yeah.
Get down. Get down.
Get in there, Lewis.
That's right, Paul.
Yes.
All right. Your drive of the race?
I'm giving it to De Vries. I know. I think he was the
good
fan
job.
favorite, but I can't. I mean, literally, the guy gave everything. You know,
Good shout.
It could so easily just become overwhelming, and yet he just put in a supreme performance, got the team points,
Yep.
and just left nothing on the table.
Just superlative. Yeah,
Yep.
no doubt about it.
Yep.
I'm giving it to Mohammed bin Salem.
Because he was driving the safety car too, was he? What was he doing? Was he driving the shuttle bus from the track to the airport?
No, he's flying the helicopters. He's flying them out of there, you know? Guys everywhere. Good grief. Gosh, I think he was in my dream last night. Anyway, I gave
don't
it.
want to hear about that.
No, well, yeah, it was. It's not good. Nothing sexual, Paul. Professional drivers are the worst.
Yeah, they are actually.
Yeah. So, all right. Great shout on De Vries. I agree with you 100%. Just to be different, I'm going to give it Carlos Sainz. I thought Carlos had a hell of a drive from the back of the grid up. I'll just stick to this. I'm not saying it would have happened, but I feel like had there not been the safety car, Carlos may have been on the podium.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think he was thereabouts, man. He looked terrific. He was on fire trying to get back up there. So good on him. Cut through that traffic really quick.
Gave the Ferraris people something to cheer
He
on
did.
during the race.
He did. And Paul, that's all we have. It's precious little, but that's all we have as Ferrari fans, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, everybody's, oh, you're so biased. Yeah, go listen to my Ferrari. I just reviewed it and I eviscerated it. So, you know, I get it. All right, let's do some mailbag. These are always
You've
fun.
got mail.
Hey, a big shout out to all you folks listening out there, sending us. If you go to the Parc Fermé, go up to the very kind of top on the menu. It'll say mailbag up there. You click on that, and you can go in and leave us questions because that's where we get all these from. And really appreciate the raft of questions lately. Let's see. Moto RGV asks, it's great to hear from you because I know you've been listening for a long time. He said, love the show, been listening since double digits, and I know that. I remember.
Wow, that's a long time.
It's a long time ago, yeah. On to the question, he says, do you think that Juan Pablo Montoya will ever tell the truth on how he hurt his shoulder back in the McLaren days? I would think that enough time has passed for statute of limitations to have passed. Plus, Ron Dennis has disappeared off the face of the earth. Thanks. That's a good question.
The answer to that is no, because there was probably some kind of insurance thing, and if you let it loose, the insurance company would be like,
wouldn't pay.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, you owe us the $3 million.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I would say no, but that's a hilarious post. Ron Dennis, yeah,
Where's
he isn't be seen. I maintain that he could be at the bottom of McLaren Lake.
Could be
I don't
just
know.
cleaning it, basically.
Yeah, he might be with the dustbuster. He made other yeah, could be down there. Let's see. Peter says, not so much a question from our friend Peter, but he does say, and he had some fun points here. He says, it occurs to me that a long history of Formula One introducing, let me try this in English, Peter. It occurs to me that there's a long history of Formula One introducing artificial modifications to racing. I don't know why I didn't think of this before, but the word chicane in French means trickery. I'm old enough to remember when they were first introduced as an artificial device to increase racing excitement and to slow cars down. So the DRS just follows in the long tradition of trying to give a better race for the fans' excitement. Similarly, are not the grid place penalties exciting for the fans? Question mark. They do make the racing of midfield very much more, a lot more dramatic and potentially thrilling. So it's more chicanery for Formula One.
Yep. I don't remember chicanes coming in for the fans' excitement.
It was to slow the cars down.
I mean, I only remember them being brought initially for safety.
Yeah. Yeah, it was to slow the cars down.
Right.
Did it come into Formula One?
Silverstone.
Did it come into Formula One first, or did it come in at Le Mans and stuff like that?
I would say Formula One.
Maybe Formula One, yeah.
I believe.
I can't remember if it was
Yeah,
sports car racing or not.
Yeah, I could be wrong too, but I do remember like Silverstone Woodcote used to be
Yeah.
a flat out corner, and then they brought in
Yeah.
chicane, and that was when I was a kid, so that was the mid '70s.
Yeah,
And we
right.
know Mulsanne had chicanes way after that. So I would say,
Yeah, that's what I was trying to remember. I was trying to think, when did Mulsanne Straight get
Yeah.
the chicanes? It was
because
after
you got
that.
like Spa brought in the bus stop chicane. I think it was all to do with
Yeah,
a lot of F1 tracks at one time were just flat out
yeah,
dangerous
Yeah.
and flat out,
yeah,
and so they started shortening the tracks, tightening some of the corners, and
yeah,
a few chicanes here and there. So I think it was predominantly for that, but
yeah.
I think they have certainly evolved to put those things in to try and create passing opportunities,
More passing
perhaps.
opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Peter's right in that sense. They've tried to put them in at the long straights and stuff like that to really slow the cars down and provide more passing opportunities, those kind of things. So that's where the
because
excitement
it's
comes.
the tight chicanes elongate the
Yeah.
the braking distances, so
Right.
that in turn helps
Right.
passing.
Yeah, but good thoughts, Peter. Appreciate that. Let's see. Gino asks, says Todd, I'm a Kansas City Chiefs fan. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, I live in St. Louis, but I was born and raised in Kansas City, and when that happens, you can never get the red out of your blood, so you're always a Chiefs fan.
It's the barbecue debacle.
Yeah. So, and if you know anything about Kansas City, for people born in Kansas City, we are barbecue snobs. And there's only one way to do barbecue, and that's molasses-based, sweet and smoky. So anyway, so I'm a Chiefs fan. So sometimes you'll see on my Twitter account, I'll be bigging up the Chiefs and stuff. Like I watched them beat Arizona last night. So anyway, he says, Todd, I'm a Chiefs fan. Living in California, it's very difficult to watch the Chiefs. Could you make a TikTok account? I watch other live feeds, and they just don't do it that well. The account that I'm watching, she has 5,000 viewers right now. You would be really helping out a Ferrari fan from Kansas City Chiefs fan. I don't know, Gino. I'm sure, here's my luck, man. I used to own a blog and a podcast called Formula1blog.com. Yeah, I had to change that.
They might shut you down. Is that what you're saying?
I
Literally, you barely have enough time with all your dancing TikToks
well, yeah,
to throw in a football game.
Yeah, all my thirst traps I'm making, and exactly. Yeah, it's tough. But, I figure, as soon as I'd launch some sort of restreaming Chiefs, they'd hammer me. They'd beat me like a narc at a biker rally.
They would.
It would just not be good. But I feel your pain because guess what? I'm watching the game, and there's still quite a bit of the game left. And yes, the Chiefs are kind of, beating the crap out of the Arizona Cardinals. And then CBS just says, well, they come back from a commercial and says, well, we're going to take you to a more competitive game. I didn't get to see the end of the game.
They showed you the beginning of a more competitive game or the end of competitive.
An end of a more
Yeah.
competitive game. I didn't get to see the end of my team beat
That's
the brains
insane.
out of Cardinals. And get this, when they started the Chiefs game, the previous game, the Steelers ran long. They kept that entire game, and when they started the Chiefs game, the Chiefs had already scored 2 touchdowns that I didn't get to see.
Oh my gosh, that would make you mad.
Oh, furious. So anyway, I'm on a soapbox. Don't get me started. All right. So, and finally, Miles asked this: how much do you weigh the following factors when you're deciding what tires to use in the race? And Paul, you are the perfect person to answer this because you do this on race weekends in and out. So number one, how much do you weigh these following factors on which tires to use during the race? 1, performance during practice on that tire. Number 2, previous simulations. Number 3, performance of other cars during the race. Or number 4, other considerations. And Miles says, what I'm getting at is, for whatever reason, you need to stop early in a race. What goes into the decision to either put on hard tires and try to one-stop or adjust to a 2-stop strategy? Paul,
Can I even
that.
answer this question?
I hope so.
Am I going to let too much info out? I mean,
Well, you might.
You know, the whole IMSA field are listening to what we're saying.
Yeah, that's
here.
true.
But so
Okay, take it generically on Formula One.
well, I mean, I no, I can delve into it. It's so. First off, you would use real-time data from that weekend because tracks are very different. Temperature is different from year to year. Even the tire can be a little different, and how you've set up the car can be different. So, the most perfect, the most accurate detail is what you've done at that track at that moment on the same weekend you're racing. That's the most solid data. Then you can go back to what we was asking about previous data, previous tests, etc. You can go back that to how things evolved on a certain time, maybe something similar to what you're having now, be it temperature wise or how the track is abrasive or non-abrasive or the latest setup you've had, that kind of thing. So you can go back to that data. You don't look so much on what other teams are doing because that doesn't really affect how you strategize your car. It does to a degree because you think, these guys are going to be pinning early, so for various reasons, not necessarily on tire day, but can happen. But you don't hold that very strong because they can be a bit tricky with you at that point. So you really try and optimize. If no one was else on the track, how would you get from the beginning to the end in the shortest amount of time? And then you'll try and start off as that's your base strategy, and then you work your way back from that as the race evolves, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Did I answer all those questions? Let me think. Was there one more? What does the decision to either put on hard tires and try and stop one? Yeah, I mean, it's all to do with the day you had on the Friday and Saturday, and you really got to make an estimate. Literally on Friday can be very different from Sunday but every team has enough data to know how a track evolves and can make estimates on what they assume or hope that the tire will do on race day as well.
And it's not, Paul, that you don't look at. I mean, other teams' cars perform differently. They can be sandbagging. They can actually be sending message to the rest of the teams, but actually have different performance. So there's a lot of argy-bargy going on there.
Oh, there's a lot of that going on. Cloak and
But
dagger
the reality,
stuff for sure.
yes, right. But the reality of it is that, if you're thinking like Formula One terms, that the, let's say the Sauber pulls in Bottas and he was setting 132.6s. They pull him in. He's on hards now, and yet he's setting brand new fresh hards. He's setting 131.8s, instead of 132.6s. So you're thinking, okay, there's a measure of that. That's a performance gain. We have their lap times when they're doing their simulation runs on Friday on different compounds. You're going to parse all that data, but that's only to sort of, I think at the end of the day, sort of vet your own data.
Yeah, and you'll definitely look at teams differently with the data they're getting, because there's teams that will perform similarly on certain tires than you do, and so you can use that data more, give you more clarity than maybe a team that's a very different. Like if you're Williams and you know that the Williams team are just don't have a lot of downforce, and you're a high downforce car, you don't glean a lot of info from that car. So you try and find also data from cars that are a lot more similar in how they go through tires and how they perform on certain tires too.
Yeah.
Great question.
Yeah, it is. Great
really
question,
question.
Miles. Very
well
good
done, Miles.
question.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that does it for the podcast. That's what we think of the Italian Grand Prix. And if you like this podcast, be sure to go over to Apple iTunes and give us a good rating over there. Also, you can share your opinion about the Italian Grand Prix. Just go to theparcferme.com and share your opinion. Just do it with decorum and civility as always. No personal attacks. A huge thank you to our Patreon supporters. And as I mentioned, we moved our podcast to the Spreaker platform. It's got ads in it, unfortunately, because we've got to pay for all this. But for our patrons, I do upload a nice clean copy of that for you guys with no ads. So really appreciate all the support you give us. And, not to get over emotional about it, but I did want to say to all of you, thank you so much for your support, your kind words, listening week in and week out. We've done this now for 800 episodes of our main podcast. I've been doing this for 17 years now. Thousands and thousands of hours. My wife has had to put up with me doing podcasts. And I'm incredibly grateful for your support. And I know Paul and Grace are as well, because I couldn't do it without either of them. And so anyway, on behalf of all of us at the Parc Fermé, thank you so much for everything you do, and for our Patreon supporters who like it enough to support it financially and keep us going. So I can't thank you enough for that, and it's always wonderful to talk to you all individually when you reach out or DM me or email me, whatever it is. And I know it's the same for Paul. I know Paul really enjoys when he's at a race and he's there, and Parc Fermé listeners come up and it's like, oh my God, it's Paul, hey, and it's great to actually see Paul in his element, right? And
I try to give people a tour.
Yeah.
Hey, speaking of which, we won a championship this year. I know people associate me with the Aston Martin team, which obviously I'm a massive part of, but I also do some other stuff on the side because I'm English and we always do stuff on the side. So so I've been part of a McLaren Speed Club team, and we won a GT championship this weekend.
Awesome.
So that was fun.
You were at Coda.
We were at Coda. Yep. Had to fight with Andy Pilgrim, who I think he was.
Yes.
We were battling with him for the championship, and we won by a squeaked in because Andy dominated the weekend. But we had just enough of an advantage going in that we were able to hold on to that championship. We had 3 McLaren GT4s in the Speed Club team. So
awesome.
In between my weekends at Aston Martin, I'm still at racetrack, which is pretty darn awesome, really, when you think about it.
Yeah, and now you're out at other performance schools and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah,
crazy. Yeah, you do. That's why they call you the international, Paul. So anyway, huge thank you for your support as always. And anyway, but all right, for that, we'll be back next weekend. We'll get Grace's thoughts, of course. We'll give Paul a much needed break, and we look forward to seeing you, Paul, at the Singapore Grand Prix race review. Should be a fun race to review.
I would hope. Be a long one.
Yes, fingers crossed. It'll be a long race, and we'll get Grace's updates on what she's been up to, and we'll go from there. But thanks so much, folks. Until that time, next week when we do it all over again, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Camera, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.